Stephen King, of course, needs no introduction, and there's a wealth of quotes and tips from him out there. So today I've picked a few that I haven't seen too often that I think we can use to help make our writing better. On the topic of making things better, I made a bit of a mistake recently when it comes to my own self-published book, but luckily today's sponsor Mibble Art can help you avoid making the same mistake that I did. Stay tuned to find out exactly how, but for now, let's start with tip number 1 from Stephen King. Stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea. Very much agree here. In fact, I think this is the number one thing that catches most new writers off guard as well as more experienced ones. There are times where you're up to your neck in a story and just nothing is working, and the whole craft of writing feels basically impossible. You can only see your mistakes and the things that you're getting wrong. At those times, it's so easy and it's so natural to assume that you're just no good at writing. Laying the fault entirely at your own doorstep is what most people will do. They'll think, oh, this is really, really hard, harder than I thought, so that must mean I'm just not cut out for this. Those famous writers have written so many books and they don't have this problem, so I guess I just don't have that talent. So they stop. They leave those few hundred words or those 10,000 words on their computer or notebook, never to return. And what doesn't get talked about nearly enough is how writing is hard for everyone, and beginning is the hardest time you'll probably ever go through as a writer. Of course you want to stop. All of the signs and all of your instincts are telling you to. They're all flashing bright red in your face. Ignore them. We're just getting going, but if you take anything from this video at all, I hope it's that. Ignore those feelings. As long as you still have that itch to tell a story, just keep going. If things don't work out, if your story goes off the rails, whatever. The very worst outcome is that you'll learn something that will make your next attempt a bit better. I think you only really lose when you stop. Take a break, by all means, if you want, but don't let it beat you. If you can manage to do that somehow, then I think it's just a matter of time till you sit back in your chair one day and smile at something that you just wrote because it's good. Number 2, paragraphs are almost as important for how they look as what they say. They're maps of intent. I really love this. In my editing work, I'll occasionally get a newer writer questioning if a paragraph's long enough, or should they add to it, or is it too long? Should they cut something? And there's always times to do both of those things, of course, but there really isn't a standard. It's basically up to you. A lot of writers might come from school or from college or from other writing related courses. Not that you have to have any of that, but they might come assuming that those rules for writing something like an essay or a professional paper will still directly apply to writing fiction. They'll quite naturally assume that paragraphs must be this, sentences must be that, and I get the great pleasure, to be honest, of being able to turn the question around and say, well, what do you think? Because that's what matters. You can build and present your story however you want to. You can make it fragmented and disjointed, or you can make it smooth and almost formless if you want. It's just a matter of choice. And if you're going to experiment with stuff like paragraph length and how things look on the page, there's only 2 things I think that you really need to bear in mind. Firstly, have a reason. To me, there needs to be a purpose behind that very short paragraph, or a reason that one sentence goes on for 10 lines. If you're saying something, or if you're sending a message or working towards that in some way with how your paragraphs are structured and set out, then there's reason behind it, and that's enough. Then secondly, clarity. If you can retain clarity in your writing, regardless of how complex or simple it looks on the page, then I think always strive to do that. I always want my stories to be enjoyable by as many people as possible, and how I present them on the page, I think, actually has an impact on that. Readers judge a book on many attributes before they've even taken it home or checked it out of the library, and one of those things is how the writing physically looks. They'll look at the space between lines, the number of words on the page, the lengths of the paragraphs, and huge paragraphs can be kind of imposing, and to some readers it'll just be a bit too much, so that is something to bear in mind, I think. However, I'm not sure it necessarily goes the other way though. I don't think too many people would put a book down for looking too easy to read. Of course, it's all dependent on getting them to actually pick up your book first or to click on it for a closer look. A huge part of that, as has always been the case really, comes down to whether your book has a great cover or not. That's the mistake that I made recently when I self-published my book, Project Ventus. Now, I'm not saying my cover is bad necessarily. I'm okay with how it turned out, but before I put so much time into branding that book and making my video ad for it and a website page and a bunch of other stuff, all based around this cover art that I really, really struggled to design, well, I just wish I'd known about today's sponsor, Mibble Art, because the process could have been a whole lot easier. If you're not familiar, Mibble Art's not just a book cover design company for indie authors, they're your partner in creating a book cover that will make your work shine. Mibble Art's main goal is to provide each author with a competitive book cover design that will not only stand out in the category, but also match the genre and attract the right target audience. That's something that I did not consider when I made my cover, I didn't even think about it. Mistakes were made. Mibble Art offers an unlimited number of revisions and will tirelessly work on your book cover design until you're completely satisfied. And they don't take any prepayment. You pay only when you're in love with the final result, and I think that really shows how much they care about getting it right for writers. That's just their main service, by the way. They've got a ton of other things that they can design for you, including stuff I never thought of looking for help on, like logos and branding for your author platform, which would be great for something like your author website or your social media. They even have a book formatting service too. They can format your book in line with all the major publishing platforms, and trust me, I've just done that. It's a pain to do it by yourself, so having a professional do it, I think would have been really nice. You can even take free email courses through Mibble Art to help you with stuff like marketing your book and cover design, which is just really helpful. Of course, the thing that will pique your interest most though is their portfolio of covers, which you can have a look at on their website. You can filter it by different genres as well. And I don't write horror or even read that much of it, to be honest, but I think their horror covers are especially good. So if you want to get a book cover that sells, here's a gift. 15% off your first order with Mibble Art. Use the promo code Kieren15 during checkout. Links are all down below. Not only will you be getting a great cover for the book that you've put so much time into, but you'll be helping support me and my channel too, so you'll have my undying thanks. Mibble Art, of course, also have my undying thanks for supporting the channel and sponsoring the video, so thanks guys. All right, back to Stephen King. Number 3, the object of fiction isn't grammatical correctness, but to make the reader welcome and then tell a story. This is a great thing to bear in mind while we're writing. I especially like how he's phrased that as making the reader welcome, because that really should be at the heart of what we do as writers. The point of writing, at least as far as I'm concerned, is making a reader feel something. The point is capturing and transferring some element of the human existence to your reader just for a split second, so that maybe they don't feel so alone, or so they laugh, or so that they feel glad to be alive. The point isn't necessarily making your punctuation conform exactly to the Chicago Manual of Style while never once wavering from the rules. All of those rules are there for a reason, of course they are. Grammatical correctness helps to hold our stories together, but in holding things together, it can sometimes feel a bit restrictive. There may be elements of your story that just don't fit within its bounds. A great lesson to learn is that you can break the rules if it's important for your story. Again, if there's a reason to do it, follow your instincts, disregard the rules if you want to. The worst eventuality is that it just won't work. And if that happens, you can just backtrack and rewrite. But remember that when you're judging if it works or not, think about if you're making the reader feel welcome, like Stephen King says. Bring them into the story, speak clearly and confidently, and no one's going to worry too much about the rules. Number 4, description begins in the writer's imagination, but should finish in the reader's. This tip really speaks to me and my style or my approach to writing, and I've said it countless times in these videos, but there's always new people here, so I'll say it again. I'm not big on detailed description. I'm getting there a bit these days. I'm not as minimal as I once was, but I'm still will always favour the straightforward, I think. However, this tip really pushes past preferences and inclinations to what's really important, which is the reason we describe things in the first place, however we choose to do it. It's about prompting an image or a feeling in the mind of a reader, or at least that's what I think it should be about. It's that I want to transfer rather than the exact specifics of something. I don't need my readers to know the particular length and distance of a solar flare or the exact shade of the flames at the sun's outer reaches. I would rather they feel the warmth of the sunlight on their face. Description does begin in the mind of the reader, that's definitely true, but while it's still in there, maybe think about what you want to achieve with it. What parts of that description and what parts of that image do you want to transfer into your reader's mind? Finding the root of that, I think, will help make our description more effective. Figuring out the why of it so we can support all of those details with purpose. Number 5, try any goddamn thing you like, no matter how boringly normal or outrageous. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, toss it. This is really good advice, and I think it links into a lot of what we've been talking about already in terms of breaking the rules from time to time. But what I especially like about this is how he isn't just encouraging us to be radical and outrageous, he's also encouraging us to be boring. And it might sound really weird, so bear with me, but I think there's actually a lot to be said for that. There are so many reasons to give up on writing, especially when we first get going and we're new to the craft. And feeling like what you're writing is boring is definitely one of those reasons. But if we think about that, it's really quite harsh. If you had a friend who was just starting to write and they were nervous and unsure but hopeful, and they sent you their story, would you be thinking, well, this better not be boring? Probably not really. You'd more likely keep things a little bit more supportive and optimistic for them, so you should be doing the exact same thing for your own writing. Even if you do think the way that you're writing your story is boring, that's not a huge deal. There are way worse things to be. Recognizing that now, or whenever you do, just helps you get a bit closer to what's interesting by comparison. So, like Stephen King says, be boring or be outrageous. But I think be something. Don't worry about writing a boring story or an interesting one. Just worry about writing a finished one. Everything else is secondary. The next story will be better, the next one better than that, and then sooner or later, you'll be using my code Kieren15 when you're ordering your custom book cover from Mibble. Sorry. Don't forget to check them out at the links down below, and thanks again to Mibble. I've covered a ton of authors in this author advice series, so here's a playlist of them all. Have a check and see if your favourite is among them. If not, leave me a comment and let me know, and I'll see if I can make a video for you. Thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.